Morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I shouted out on LinkedIn and on Facebook earlier that I was meant to be going on Nick Ferrari's show on LBC this morning to talk about the David Sullivan case, the former West Ham owner, who has been investigated by the BBC. And there is an episode of Panorama going out tonight to talk about the reasons for that. Now, for any number of different reasons, and mainly for the reason I'm going to talk about in this video, I'm not going to go anywhere near those allegations. One, because I don't understand football. I'm not as passionate about football as some, although you don't obviously need to understand football to get to some of the issues in this case. But having said that, we don't know what those issues are just yet. We don't know what Panorama are going to say. So when a story like this breaks, involving what could be really serious allegations, I think a lot of people say, well, can the media talk about this? Well, yes, but they have to be very careful. That's not so much the question as to how do you report about it without getting it wrong. Legally speaking, at least in this stage of the story, which Panorama is working very hard to stand up. At this stage, it's not about proving what happened. It's about making sure what's published or broadcast is fair and accurate and doesn't go any further than the actual evidence that's available. That can be tough sometimes, but obviously there is serious danger if you go further than that. Why does this matter to the audience that I'm always talking to, hoping to be useful to, recycling the time I spent prepping for this interview for this video? If you're an agency, you're never going to talk about this kind of thing, but you will do reactive work at some point, or you will be asked by your clients to do reactive work. That can be campaigns, social posts, spokesperson lines, because you want to get out in front of something quickly, you want a newsjack, maybe. That's where risk starts to creep in. If your language drifts away from reporting an allegation in a balanced way, or you jump on a narrative that isn't actually established, then you may have to try and establish that fact later after the fact in a defamation or a malicious falsehood claim. If you're a publisher, you've got to be more forensic. Well, everybody's got to be forensic when they report this kind of stuff or talk about it, but publishers even more so, because you've got to keep a very, very clear, bright line between an allegation and an actual finding of fact. Make sure that your headlines match the evidence, and you've got to give a proper right of reply, which Panorama will have done in this case. A lot of legal issues don't tend to actually come from the story, although, again, we don't know in this case. They usually come from some kind of overstatement of the position or misrepresentation of the position. From the brand's perspective, you wouldn't go anywhere near this again, but again, you might want a newsjack. And again, the risk is normally in the response. Humour, although there's nothing to laugh about in this particular case. And again, newsjacking is nothing new, but it's certainly increasing. Again, thinking about planning in peacetime, thinking about good comms. Can you comment? Should you comment? Do you try to distance yourself? Do you say nothing about it? And that might be the brands that are involved in this as well, if they are. Each of those carries a different risk, especially if you're relying on some kind of allegation that hasn't been proven. This raises issues around defamation law, malicious falsehood, data protection potentially, and also under the Ofcom broadcasting code if you're talking about obviously broadcast content, or the ASA if you're using this as part of a marketing campaign. And in this case, obviously, nobody's going to do that. It'd be hugely inadvisable. So the thread running through all of this is going to be discipline. That's discipline in the wordings you use, in the process behind it, to make sure you stay on the right side of the law, on the right side of regulation. In the case of the BBC, on the right side of their editorial guidelines, and knowing what you actually know. What can you say now is a fact, as opposed to what's being alleged, which may involve issues of opinion that also have to be based on true fact. So the law does allow comment on this kind of thing. It does allow robust journalism. When the stakes are high, though, the difference between getting it right and getting into trouble can just be a few words. So yeah, hopefully that's useful. Now I don't have to do any more radio today, and I'm always privileged to be able to do it. I'm going to go off as usual in search of coffee. Cheers, guys.